What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. We're in the midst of Sony Week here at Pod Cameras, and today I am joined by Peter Neill, who is a Sony ambassador and a live music and events photographer. Pete, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
How are you? How are you doing with lockdown and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, I mean, like everyone else, it's just been a little weird trying to find new ways to make the living room look different and feel like a different place. It's definitely been a challenge work-wise. Obviously, with my work predominantly being about live events, the very thing which there has never been less of, it's obviously been quite a challenge. I've been luckier than some in some sense that some projects that I had done stills and video work on over the last number of years that had elements of them put on the long finger or the back burner because of more pressing needs. Some of those have been carrying on as regards, editing and post-production, which has given me a certain amount of work, which is fantastic. And I guess the difference being between able to put food on the table for the kids and not, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So definitely managing, aware that some people have it a lot tougher, to be honest with you. Then, photo-wise, it's a little bit of work I have been doing. It's kind of adapted a little bit. Like I've done a couple of shoots with dancers and the like, just because there's been dancers who are basically a friend of mine who I met on a music video, a guy called Brendan Hansford. He's a choreographer and director. And he basically introduced me to a couple of his friends who are looking to get new shots done and, particular dance moves, which requires a sense of timing. So I was able to carry over a little of that kind of skill set and do a little bit of that, which is, and do it safely as well in an empty photo studio and then never really getting closer than, 4 or 5 meters from the client. So it's bizarre, but it worked. But yeah, it's been a tough time, but we're managing, It's good
that you're able to kind of do bits like that. And like you say, it's a good time, I suppose, to update the portfolio with the dancers and stuff like that. So that's handy.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, in an ideal world, it would be nice to be able to go further afield but it's, we just need to, I guess, keep doing this as long as it's necessary to save as many lives as possible. I mean, it's hard to know what 2021 is going to be like at this point. I mean, I'm a little bit anxious about whether or not gigs will return next year. I mean, nobody has the answer to that. So I'm just going to have to probably keep diversifying as much as I can until my main love comes back,
Yes. Actually, speaking about that specifically, so I've been checking out a bunch of your photos, kind of Queen and all kinds of stuff, Rick Astley and things like that. We've got one of your photos behind you now as well. That's right, isn't it?
Yes. I'm going to do a dive now.
Nice.
A picture. Oh, now you've got my chair in.
Bit of chair.
So that was with Take That. That was Rick Astley was opening for Take That on their tour in 2019 last year, and kind of number of the nights I shot Take That as well, which is great. And they had some incredible stage setup, as you see there.
It looks amazing. Yeah, it looks.
Yeah, I'll actually just move my chair. So the interesting thing about that shot was, you can see a bit of my couch now.
I'll pop the photo up so everyone can see it.
Yeah, that might be better. But basically, you can. It's actually stitched because it's 2 shots on the A7R3, or maybe was it 3? It was either 2 or 3, but taken in portrait mode in order to give me the extra bit of height. I think it was 3 shots actually. And the nice thing about stitching panoramas in portrait mode is, you just get a higher, like a taller panorama than you would otherwise.
Yeah.
So, and I was lucky to get a little bit of a firework going off.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So
it looks like quite the show, to be honest. With all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost a bit, as a photographer approaching it, it's almost a bit overwhelming because there's so much going on. You're like, where do I start? There's nothing you can shoot where you don't feel you're missing something else.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So how did you get into doing music photography? Because obviously Take That and Rick Astley, that's pretty high level.
Yeah. So I had a kind of a bizarre entry into the field. So I for many years back in Ireland, I was working in IT. I'm born in Ireland, grew up in the west of Ireland, and kind of moved to Dublin for college. and got into IT, and I was like network admin in various places, and repairing PCs, building PCs, desktop support, all that kind of stuff with HP and Compaq and all kinds of stuff. And then when the big recession started hitting 2007, 2008, the IT industry in Ireland was really, really taking a hit, and the company that I was in at the time started to fold. So I kind of found out with about 6 to 8 weeks notice that I was going to be out of a job. And from a young age, I had an interest in cameras, and I had a grandfather who lived with us growing up, who had taught me a good bit, about with a Praktica SLR that he had, but I hadn't done much with it. But just before the recession, I had, like a lot of people, jumped in the bandwagon and bought. Do you remember when everyone was buying digital SLRs around that time?
Yeah, definitely.
I bought a Canon 350D, and with like a Christmas bonus in about whatever year it was. And so I started, I thought, well, maybe I should get back into this more, just at least as a hobby whilst I was looking for other work, just to try and distract myself. And eventually, within about 6 months of doing that, I got into wedding photography. And it was great. Like, it really helped income-wise for those first couple of years of that recession. But it kind of, it started to kill my love for photography, because I found it way too stressful. I discovered that I was not built for photographing weddings, to be honest with you. Some people are, but I always felt that, even though I never had one go wrong, I always felt I was within one thunderstorm from that happening.
Sure.
If you know what I mean.
Definitely.
So, yeah. So props to probably a lot of the people who are watching this who do weddings and manage them well. Fair play to you. So I thought, well, it started to kill my love for photography. So I thought to myself, am I going to continue in photography? I need to find a way to do it that I love. And a mate of mine, Shane, who's a musician, who I knew I was having this kind of thought process, he sent me an advertisement for a web development contract, which I used to do web development as well. And the reason he sent it to me was it was this 2-week contract in a graphic design company that was owned by U2. So he thought that maybe this was an angle for me. So I applied for this contract, got the contract, 2-week contract. And my first week there, I had been hoping to meet this guy called Steve Averill, who's the guy who named U2 and also designed their album covers. And he wasn't there, and I was gutted. My second week there, I remember, I think it was like the Monday or the Tuesday, I remember I was on my lunch break having a sandwich whilst reading about this guy, Steve, because I was planning on introducing myself to him later that day. And he was up on my screen, his Wikipedia page or whatever page it was, and someone tapped me in the shoulder, and I turned around and it's Steve. There is nothing more embarrassing than the person tapping you in the shoulder who you're reading about. So that was kind of awkward. But he became a really good mate, and I showed him, I had nothing to show him really apart from weddings and, pictures at, I think the most appropriate pictures I had to show him were pictures at dances and little gigs that had been organized as part of wedding receptions. So that was like low light stuff in often very badly lit rooms. And I always stayed to shoot a good portion of them as the packages I was doing for weddings. And he liked it enough to contact U2. And they brought me over to Sheffield in Don Valley Stadium in 2009 as my first gig, which was completely bizarre. And then stuff was really hitting the fan in Ireland financially at the time. So although that gig went well, and some of the pictures actually ended up in the official tour book of that tour, I did nothing for the next year. And then it was like firefighting at home. And then I got a call from Steve nearly a year later, inviting me back on behalf of U2 to shoot their gig in Paris. And that gig, I was lucky, got me my first magazine cover, which was a billboard cover of Bono kind of stretching his arms out like this.
Wow.
I can send you that picture if you don't have
amazing,
it.
Yeah.
And it was great, and it was fantastic to do it. And I realized I had an opportunity at this point to try and use the portfolio from these 2 gigs to maybe get some more work in the industry. And so went back to promoters in Ireland, very aware of the fact that I had shot these really brilliantly lit gigs, but didn't have a lot of experience from dingy, low lit venues with terrible lighting, or, so I realized I had a lot of learning to do, but I used these 2 gigs to show portfolio to some promoters in Ireland who gave me access to gigs and allowed me to shoot them, basically paid for parking. They got pictures for social media. They basically paid, like I said, just paid enough just to cover my parking in the city. And did that for a couple of years, and then gradually got my first big client, which was The Script, who I still do a ton of work with. And they kind of that opened doors to like my first kind of tour, traveling worldwide with them. And then they introduced me to people like Gary Barlow and will.i.am. And then I got connected with a kind of a social media agencies in London who were working in the music industry. And that connected me with other artists like JP Cooper and Tom Walker. And of course, Rick Astley, who I do a ton with and is probably the nicest person in music as well. So yeah, it's been a bizarre journey, but I'm very grateful for it. I'm just a little anxious about the future.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I don't think anyone expected this really, but yeah, I guess just getting through. But so do you have like a, because you've done all, like I say, Rick Astley and I was looking at a bunch of stuff. You've done some really high level artists. You've covered a lot of big gigs by the looks of it. Do you have a particular favorite that you've done? One that stands out?
So,
I mean, the Take That one behind you looks pretty cool, to be honest.
I think my favorite gig, if I had to pick one gig, was with The Script in Croke Park in 2015. That gig was phenomenal. It was the biggest gig they'd ever done. Croke Park is about the same size as Wembley as regards capacity. It's an enormous stadium in Dublin. And they filled that out. And not only was the lighting and the pyrotechnics were incredible and the band were in absolutely top form, it was also a massive event for the band. And because I was so involved with them and involved with the planning, involved the backstage, I'm really good mates with all the band, it was kind of everyone working together. So it was, as well as being a great thing spectacle wise, it was emotionally such a crescendo as well. So that's probably my favorite gig of all time, that I'd be surprised if I ever top that one. But in general, my favorite clients to work, I don't mind saying it, are them, The Script, and Rick Astley, because they're just lovely people. And at the end of the day, I think one of the biggest things about being happy in your work is being happy who you work with. And they are people who just, I guess, are a joy to be around and kind of give me motivation to do my best.
Yeah, that's really nice. That's important, isn't it? And I mean, obviously, I've never met any of these people. Rick Astley seems like he'd be a really nice guy, so it's nice to hear that he's such a good guy to work with. So talking about like low lit, kind of not particularly well lit, smaller venues, do you have any tips for anyone looking to get into kind of this kind of photography who probably is starting off in these kind of smaller venues with perhaps not great lights?
So the one thing I kind of started to realize very quickly when I got into music photography, that there are two approaches. You can either go in with, if you're going in with, for argument's sake, with one lens on one camera body, which a lot of people, including myself, was when I was starting out. There's two approaches. You can either go in with a lens like a zoom lens, whether it be a 24-70 or whatever the case may be, which is kind of a very much kind of can do anything, but it doesn't specialize really in any. It's not the best at any one particular focal length. It's just a jack of all trades. And that is a great, it's a good thing to do. And especially if you're working if you're being paid by a client rather than just shooting for free, if there's specific shots you have to get and there's a wide variety of shots, then maybe that's what you have to do. But if you're like what I was doing, shooting for free and really just shooting to get for experience in those early days, I found that by limiting myself, that was one of the most important factors. And I, for the first number of gigs, I really only shot with a 50mm prime. And yes, there was a lot, in looking back at those old gigs, there was a lot of shots that I didn't get, but again, I wasn't being paid to shoot those gigs, but there was a lot of shots that I didn't get, for instance, the whole band, unless I went further back into the crowd and the like, which I often did. But There was also lots of shots that I got because I had to work for them. So I had to physically move to frame to get to frame the shot right and go into the right place to get the shot. And forcing yourself to be put in a scenario where you have to think about that is a really important thing, because you end up, it affects every aspect of your shot, and you end up, because creativity has become a necessity rather than an optional, you end up with better shots. So I'm a big love of kind of like limitations in that, whether that be through prime lenses, or it might be these days, if I'm working multiple nights on a tour, for instance, I might on one given night just use a 70-200, and another night just use a prime, another night just use an 85. So you're approaching it each night with a different mindset. Because if you just do the same gear every night, you'll find yourself just using the same lenses again and again, trying to better the shot you got last night, but not really getting variety, because you'll just end up with a ton of shots that look almost the same from multiple nights. As regards what lenses I use, so as you know, I'm a Sony ambassador, and one of the reasons I went to kind of approach Sony because I was previously with Canon cameras, and not an ambassador, but it was used Canon cameras.
Sure.
And one of the reasons I kind of wanted to get into Sony but couldn't afford the transition costs, and so I therefore approached Sony about, maybe we could set up some kind of relationship, was I had borrowed the first edition of the A7S with a Sony 50mm on it. And I'd been blown away, not just by the mirrorless technology, but by the quality of the lens as well. And I was very lucky over the last couple of years to develop a relationship with them and become an ambassador. So right now, my main gear, I guess, that's in the bag lens wise would be, I have an 85 1.4 GM, and I absolutely adore that lens. It can be very, very handy. You know how I was talking about the 50mm earlier? So at a slightly bigger venue, say if you're at a medium size, the 85 becomes your equivalent of that 50mm because you're a bit further back. So it gives you that shallow depth of field, and allows me to put those limitations on myself, which I still find phenomenally useful, because it forces that creativity. I have a 70-200, which is obviously a great lens to have, especially when you're going back, behind the crowd, and you're trying to maybe get yourself quite low, so you're shooting through the arms in the air, and you get that lovely effect of having the artist with the arms crossing over them, blurred from the back of a venue. Getting super wide shots is also a great thing as well. And for that, I have a 12-24. It's a Sony lens, and that's fantastic just because of the lack of distortion in it. I'd previously had a 15mm fisheye lens, which was great, and it was great to have that. But just having this 12-24 has been fantastic. Now it's f4, but that's less of an issue than it was for me a few years ago, because if you think about it, ISO performance and noise levels has improved so much over the last few years that it's effectively upgraded all this gear that was previously too slow. And now a lot of this gear that was previously too slow is now usable in lower light environments than it was back then.
Yeah.
So it's a great little side effect of the improvement in technology. I do have a 24-70 as well, which I use a lot, and it's not to say it's never appropriate. There are times it's appropriate. I mean, I am lucky that I shoot with two bodies most of the time, and I'll often have a 50mm or an 85mm on one, and the 24-70 on the other. So, if I do need to get a specific wide shot at a particular moment, I can grab that. So I'm lucky just to have the two bodies to be able to do that. Bodies wise, I'm shooting on an A7R4, A7R3, and an A7S2, and I'll probably upgrade the S2 and S3 whenever gigs come back.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you were thinking about the S3, because obviously for low light stuff, that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, and the S2 is incredible as well, but the S3, I am dying to try it from what I've seen, because it's just, I mean, the reason I still use the S2 often I don't need the super high resolution, and it might be that I just really need as little noise as possible in a ludicrously low light environment, and the S2 is absolutely phenomenal for that. It's also great for video. I do quite a bit of video.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, and sometimes it's for like on one night on a given gig, for instance, if it's a multiple night gig, I'll just do video, and I'm shooting in PP7 or S-Log2 basically on the Sony A7S2 or the R3 or the R4, depending on what cameras I'm using, and that can be very handy. Or on some gigs, what I've done is I've put the camera on the sound desk on a tripod, and left it recording in S-Log2 from the back to get like a video of the show. That it might be that the client just wants a video of the show, so for looking back at later, and it's more for, I guess, for identifying the strengths and weaknesses of the show, or it might be that they're going to use it for something going out later or something, like a reel, a little summary of the tour reel or something like that. But yeah, it's great to be able to flick between the two. And of course, the other nice thing about when you're shooting video, you're shooting at lower frame rates. So as a result, you're getting more light in than you would, if I'm shooting 1/400th of a second to capture a jump, whereas my shutter's at 1/50th on video. It's much easier to get incredibly nice video at a given light level, with video rather than stills.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. I hadn't thought about that, but that obviously comes in handy, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. So what's your kind of process? How much post-processing do you do on the images? Do you keep it pretty much, you get it kind of in camera, or are you more towards kind of doing stuff in Lightroom and Photoshop and that kind of thing?
I do very little in Photoshop, extremely little. The only time I would really do anything in Photoshop would be if, for argument's sake, a picture was for a tour poster. So therefore, if it's for a tour poster or a tour program, in scenarios like that, it's okay to remove things like bottles off the stage, because you're not claiming a picture is like kind of like a press representation or that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas for pictures that are just going out on Facebook the night of the event or the day after, I pretty much exclusively Lightroom. I mean, you get as much as you can in camera. It's really just color toning mostly in Lightroom. Sometimes you're pushing the shadows, and the great thing, about having cameras with a good high dynamic range is that you're able to push the shadows and not end up in a murky mess. So in this image behind us, you'll probably notice that I've played with the black levels, which is giving it that kind of look, and also there's kind of a blue tint on the shadows.
Yes.
And then some sharpening done as a last stage of the process, but it's certainly not intensive. And I would never ever start cloning stuff like smoke or dry ice or anything, or adding that stuff in, or adding lights in, or it's a big no.
So more sort of capturing it in camera, and then maybe like you say, playing around with the shadows and things like that.
Absolutely. Bringing the shadows is a very obviously quite a common thing.
Yeah.
Because if you're especially at a gig with maybe has bright strobes, and you're exposing to avoid, I'd much rather have these strobes and not have them blowing out and have to bring up detail in the shadow than the other way around. Because once you've blown stuff out, you just got this horrible patch in your picture with no detail.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So do you have we talked about a favorite gig earlier on. Do you have a favorite image you've ever taken? Or is there one out there that you're still hoping to get one day or anything like that?
So I have a couple of favorite images. One of them is a picture which I'm pretty sure you hopefully have a copy of. But one of my favorite pictures is probably one of the scripts that was for a tour in 2015, and it's where they're all jumping on the stage or all in the air at the same time. And it's a favorite for a couple of reasons, not just because of the composition, but also because of the work that went into it. Because it took several nights to coordinate that picture and get it to work just right. So it's a favorite for kind of like two reasons. And then I have another picture, which is a very glam rock picture of Brian May with this amazing golden fleece that he's wearing, swinging around him as he sticks his arm up in the air. And it's just, it looks in some ways like something out of the 70s, but he pulls it off so well. And I've always been a massive Queen nut. I kind of grew up collecting vinyl with my brothers, you know. So doing some work with Queen and Madame Lambert over the last few years has been kind of like a dream come true. So yeah, I reckon those two shots are probably my absolute favorites.
That is, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty cool one to be able to pick from. And you've got so many great shots of different bands and stuff like that. And yeah, working with some pretty awesome artists as well. Sure. But yeah, thank you so much for talking with us today about all kinds of stuff. We've got a live event, I think, during Sony Week with you, where you can be talking more about music stuff, so people can see more of Pete over there as well. There'll be links to various things in the description of this video, so you can go and check that out for various Sony products we talked about. And of course, Pete, are you on Instagram?
I am. I'm on pretty much every platform under the username Shoot the Sound.
Awesome. Okay, so you can go check Pete out there. There's some pretty awesome photos. I imagine I've seen a bunch of your photos, so I imagine there's a bunch of them on Instagram as well. So definitely worth having a look at. And thank you very much for watching.
Thanks very much, everyone.